Hello, let's solve the Fibonacci closure exercise in a tour of Go. So this exercise is asking us to implement a Fibonacci function that returns a function that returns successive Fibonacci numbers. So the Fibonacci sequence is a sequence of numbers that starts with 0 and 1, and then every number after that is calculated by adding the previous two numbers. So 0 plus 1 is 1, and then 1 plus 1 is 2, and then 2 plus 1 is 3, and so on. So we need to we need to create a function that calculates the sequence of numbers. So we need to define a variable x, which is an integer, and then we need to increment this variable every time the function is called. But not this function, but the function that we're going to return here. So return function that returns a integer, and then every time this function is called, we need to increment this x variable, and this x variable is going to tell us which number in the sequence we want to get, the first, the second, the third, and so on. So x plus equals 1. So the first two numbers are easy. If x equals 1, we want to get the first Fibonacci number, and that one is 0. So we return, we're going to say that fib equals 0. If x equals 2, then we need to return 1. So fib equals 1. And then we return fib. We need to define the fib variable. We're going to declare it over here. So we say variable fib, which is an integer. So let's try this out. So we get 0, and then 1, and then we get just zeros. This is because when the Fibonacci number is declared as an integer, it gets its nil value, which is equal to 0. So that is why when we return fib down here, we get a list of zeros. So we need to calculate the Fibonacci numbers after the second one. So if Fibonacci is not, if x is not 1 or 2, we need to say that fib equals the previous Fibonacci number plus the second previous Fibonacci number. So how are we going to get these values? That's easy, because every time we calculate a number, say we want to get the second number, not the second, the third number, we already know that the previous number is 1 and the second previous number is 0. If we want to get the fourth number, we know that the previous number is 1 and the second previous is 1. So all we need to do is save those previous values in these variables when we calculate them. So when we want to get the third Fibonacci number, we need to get the first and the second saved in previous 1 and previous 2. So in order to do that, every time we call the function, we're going to save these values. So if x equals 2, we are at this point, and we want to get previous 1 and previous 2 for the next time the function is called, by the time we calculate the third Fibonacci number. That means we need to save 0 and 1. And this is gonna be a little strange, because we're gonna set previous 1 equal to fifth, which is the Fibonacci number that we are returning. And then we're going to set previous to equal to some temporary variable. And in this temporary variable, we are going to save the value of previous 1 before we override it with the value of fifth. So we need to say the temporary variable equals previous 1. And then over here, we say that previous 1 equals fifth. We cannot set previous 2 on this block, because by that time we are only here on the first number and there is no previous number to that one, so we only set previous 1. So we need a temporary variable, which is an integer, and then we need previous 1 and previous 2 variables, which are also integers. We can also put the x here on this declaration, and then we save a line of code. So the reason why we are declaring previous 1 and previous 2 in this outer function is because we want them to keep their value. We don't want them to be reset when this function is called, which is what happens with fib and temporary. We don't care about these values. They are supposed to be that temporary. This is just the value that we return, and this is a temporary value that we don't really want to keep. But previous 1 and previous 2 are values that we want to keep for the next time this function executes. So this function is closing over the value of x, previous 1 and previous 2. It has access to those values even after the Fibonacci function has returned. That's actually the closure. So anyway, we have we say that temporary is previous 1, and then we set previous 1 to Fibonacci, and then we set previous 2 to temporary. And then we're going to do the same thing down here after we calculate the Fibonacci number. Let's see if this works. So you get 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and 34. So that's how you solve this exercise. You can actually move these 3 lines of code down here, and then you can get rid of these other ones and reduce the lines of code in your program. Reducing the lines of code in your program shouldn't be a goal. You're not trying to write as many lines of code or as little lines of code, but not repeating yourself, that should be a goal. And in this case, we don't want to repeat ourselves. So, and it's the same result: 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and 34. So if you have a different solution, feel free to share it, and I'm sure we'll learn from each other. So thank you.